Hi, lovely to have you here. Welcome to the Electro Revolution channel. My name is Michael and I'm a car and tech enthusiast. In this series of episodes, we're going through statements for the road user charges, both for and against, a number of statements that we're going through. This is episode 4. If you haven't watched the first 3 episodes, I invite you to go watch those because this is a continuation of all those. In this particular episode, what we're going through is 3 main statements. The first being that EVs boost national security, Australia's national security, and they do that by lowering the dependence on foreign oil, and that's the oil imports. And the second thing is that Australia should be leading climate change efforts. Of course, we're going to be discussing that. And the last one is through autonomous driving that EV vehicles provide, things like Robo-Taxis and things like that. We're going to be looking at those 3 main items in this particular episode. So I really hope you enjoyed this episode. So this one talks about bolstering our national security via EVs to reduce our fossil fuel reliance. Now, the 4 for this is based on the fact that we have such huge capacity here in Australia if more investment were put into renewable energy. Like we've got plenty of sun, plenty of wind, and plenty of batteries that we can install to store all the energy produced during the day and generated during the day by wind power and solar power. So what's it mean by reducing our reliance on fossil fuels? Well, essentially what that means is if we were to go to war at some stage, we have enough fuel in the country to last about 2 weeks for our army, for our tanks, for our jets, for all of this stuff. About 2 weeks. And then what do we do when we can't drive around, when we've got no more fuel left? It's a major, major problem. Where in terms of batteries and energy and wind power, we've got unlimited sources here in Australia if we were to utilize everything we've got. Now, the argument against that is to say our power grid can't handle fluctuations. Now, if that were true, then why are there 7 countries at the moment in the world that are 100 and 113% completely renewable? They have nothing else, no fossil fuels, no nuclear power, nothing, just completely renewable energy. What are those countries? Well, let me list them for you. We have Iceland, and of course they've got a lot of hydropower in terms of water. There's Albania, Nepal, Bhutan, Ethiopia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Paraguay. Now, if they can do 100% renewable and they've got sun, but not like us, why can't Australia do it? Can it handle fluctuations in the grid? Well, how do they handle the fluctuations in the grid? Like, if you can do it in other countries, we can do it in Australia. So that argument does not hold water. Now, one of the reasons also we got to understand about imported fuels. We don't make any fuel here in Australia. We can refine it, but we don't make it. We can import oil barrels and refine the oil barrels. Again, we don't make it. Now, the problem with importing oil is what we can see, say for example, in the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Oil prices had to go up. I mean, even building supplies had to go up. Houses that were being built because there was certain wood that was purchased from Ukraine was now no longer supplied. We had to source it from somewhere else, which was more expensive, which increased house prices. I mean, wars affect many things. But what we do know, and what we've all experienced before EV cars were introduced in Australia, is every time there was a war, every time there was a cough of a war, we would get increased fuel prices. Why? This is incredible, but that's what happened. Now, that's because we're so reliant on imported oil. We need to remove that reliance and become independent completely from fossil fuels in Australia. And doing so won't have a problem with the grid. It'll actually be enhanced with the grid. Now, you may remember also in our last federal election, we had the opposition leader say we needed 50 nuclear reactors to handle the load because that's considered core load, core energy production at a cost of $480 billion, I remember. I mean, it's good they lost the election. because of that policy. I remember I was completely against that policy. Why would you spend $480 billion? And it's never $480 billion with a nuclear reactor project. 15 to 20 year build is typical for a nuclear reactor, and they always go over budget. Every single nuclear reactor was ever built in the entire world went over budget. So they were certainly not going to not go over budget in Australia. And how can Australians afford $480 billion over 20 years? I mean, you really got to look at that. I was looking the other day at our current debt level, it's over 900 billion. We got to pay off our debts, but that's another video altogether. Nevertheless, let's go back onto the topic. In Australia, we import 90% of all our liquid fuels from overseas, and that leaves our nation highly exposed to supply disruptions from global conflicts, from shipping bottlenecks, which we know happen, and from price volatility on international oil markets. Now, when you look at what the International Energy Agency had to say about this, they've repeatedly warned that fuel importing nations, they face a strategic risk when dependent on unstable global oil supply chains. So this is something we need to abolish within Australia and do more investment in renewables. So what do EVs do? When we're not so dependent on oil imports, we can bear the shocks of anything that happens in oil prices overseas because it won't actually impact Australians. It won't actually impact Australia. If we're all driving EVs, number one, we'll have cleaner air. Number two, we can charge cheaply, either from home or from other core power. But let's say we're 100% renewable at that time with backup batteries. I mean, we can have vehicle to load, vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, all of these extra technologies. We should be leading the world in Australia in these technologies instead of just falling behind when we're becoming more and more reliant on fossil fuels and nuclear power, for example. So to summarize this point, every EV on the road reduces the reliance of imported oil. It strengthens our national energy independence. It protects our economy from global fuel shocks that can happen from all sorts of reasons, and it enhances our long-term national security. This is all positive, positive, positive. So I hope this clears up that particular point. As a wealthy nation, Australia must lead global climate efforts. Now, of course, one of the reasons of that is electrification of our fleet of road vehicles. Now, there's an interesting suggestion on the road user tax that they're first going to hit electric trucks and electric semis. Now, when you really consider that, one of the worst things we can possibly do is that, because getting rid of diesel trucks, which cause a huge amount of pollution and illnesses and sickness within our communities, that's one of the best things we can possibly do. So hitting a road user tax on an EV truck first will actually give a disincentive for any company to purchase those vehicles first and just keep using the dirty diesel fuel that's in many of the diesel semis and many of the diesel trucks. So you may think that Australia is such a small country compared to the rest of the world, but let's go through some statistics to just give some perspective on that type of comment. Now, there's the claim here that Australia has both the capacity and the responsibility to lead global climate efforts. Why? Because Australia is one of the highest per capita emitters of greenhouse gases in the world, producing nearly 4 times the global average per person. And that's despite having only 0.3% of the world's population. Australia contributes about 1.2% of global emissions, and that places us in the top 15 emitters in the entire world. And wealthy nations like us, we've historically benefited from fossil fuel use, and therefore, unfortunately, we bear a greater responsibility to share that responsibility under the Paris Agreement principle, which basically said common but differentiated responsibilities. So for developing nations, many of which contribute far less emissions, they're already suffering disproportionately from the climate change impacts, such as the sea level rising, the droughts, the extreme weather, and yet they have fewer resources to adapt than Australia. And we're in a quite unique position to lead in this way, because some of the best renewable energy resources in the world, with solar and wind potential far exceeding domestic demand, and that's by investing in clean energy and electrification. Australia can not only cut its own emissions, but also become a global exporter of zero carbon technology. So in short, we as a wealthy high emitting nation with world-class renewable resources, we have both a moral and strategic obligation and opportunity to lead the global climate efforts. Anything less risks our economy, our international standing, and the future of vulnerable nations worldwide. So I hope that covers that point. Now, this is an interesting one. EVs and Robo-Taxis. They'll decongest our cities. Now, I'm in two minds about this myself. On the one hand, I can see the pie in the sky. I can see that there's potential for a technology, but it's not proven at this stage. So I can see the negative also that predictions are made within the next 10 years that the Robo-Taxis and things like Tesla are doing, Waymo are doing, all these types of things will be more as a mobility as a service instead of needing to own a vehicle. And doing it in that way reduces the parking requirements. And parking is expensive when you park, especially in the city. Parking is extremely expensive when you compare it with, say, suburban parking. So it's in an effort to reduce parking requirements, but again, there's a for and there's against. And in the against, there's the argument that those robo-taxis also need parking, which is true. But in terms of those types of ideas, I'm sure companies that perform these robo-taxis would have parking lots specifically for their own vehicles, and they won't have to take up so much space in cities and other areas where typically owner-owned vehicles would typically park. So I can see for the for, there's a benefit. Like if you need to go shopping, for example, like these days, people can contact Uber and other suppliers like that for trips, whether they've been partying a night or just want to go shopping. You can do all of that sort of stuff, and you've got home delivery for shopping, things like that. I mean, all of this is getting more and more mobile. So do you want to eventually own a vehicle which costs tens of thousands of dollars and requires maintenance and requires various other things? Like if you've got an EV, you still have to charge it. I mean, it runs out of battery. If you've got an ICE vehicle, you have to deal with its fumes and servicing and refilling that particular vehicle, changing the oil, all of this sort of stuff. So maintaining a car isn't just in terms of refueling and stuff, it's also changing your wheels and cleaning the car every week or every 2 weeks to keep making it look good, those types of things. So if you didn't have to own a car, you would literally save yourself thousands and thousands of dollars per year in those maintenance costs and thousands of dollars in the initial purchase cost. And then you equate that to how many times you would actually need to, say, use a robo-taxi and how much it would cost. Now, you've got to remember with robo-taxis, they won't be manned, they won't be human. And as Uber has found, the human component is the biggest cost. So what Tesla promises, for example, with their robo-taxis is because they're unmanned, that means the price to ride in one will actually be many times cheaper than having to pay for a particular person to be driving the vehicle. So again, I'm in two minds about that personally. I see the fors and I see the against, and would I trust an autonomous vehicle? It's got to be a proven technology for me to feel safe and comfortable, especially if I'm taking my family in for a ride. Otherwise, I would maybe rent a car, or if I didn't own a vehicle, maybe I'd consider renting a car, to take a long trip on a holiday, hours drive, that sort of stuff, maybe a rental would do if I didn't own a car. Otherwise, I still see value in owning a vehicle at this stage without, the pie in the sky stuff. Like, it's hard to understand and hard to accept when someone says this is the way it's going to be without the actual evidence. So that's the other point, and I hope this one covers this point. I mean, if you've got your own opinions and comments, share them. I would love to hear your thoughts. The other point I would like to mention on this particular topic is there are consortiums and are the thinkers out there that are planning on road systems over the next 50 years. So it's not that this stuff isn't going to happen, it's that it may not be the time right now that it's happening. Yet with autonomous vehicles, there's already these people planning. I was reading reports on this before, already people planning for, say, a white traffic light, which those autonomous vehicles will use and will be able to sense. Worldwide there's red, yellow and green, or sometimes different countries have that yellow one as orange. So they're the three main colors, but already they're talking about the introduction of the white for those autonomous vehicles, and particular markings on the road and particular electronics embedded into the road, which will allow those autonomous vehicles to talk to one another and to be able to talk to the traffic systems that are then responsible for the smooth running of the traffic. So this is all being discussed now on how we can implement this sort of stuff well into the future, and maybe after our lifetimes this stuff will happen. But for this stage right now, yes, it's extremely unlikely that we'll have this right now, but again, there's potential, and it's important to see the actual evidence and the functionality of these things actually working. That was the end of episode 4. Now, we did cover quite a few points now between all of these 4 episodes. I hope you really enjoyed this episode, and I hope this gets you thinking and maybe some discussion points that you'd like to comment on. Now, if you did like this video, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this content with someone who'd be interested, or just leave a comment. It really all helps. Until the next episode, I hope to see you there. Bye for now.